You're listening to Paul G's Corner, where history proves that saying it can't happen here usually means it already did. "1969 looked bright on the surface. Pastels, polished chrome, muscle cars growling down American streets, and televisions humming with moon landings. But all that shine only hit a crack running from Washington to Moscow to Beijing. A pressure line, humming beneath the noise, waiting for exactly the wrong moment to open. Vietnam owned the American psyche. Fathers who had fought on the beaches of Normandy and the frozen hills of Korea watched as their sons disappear into a jungle they couldn't pronounce. The country was stretched thin, faith was bleeding out, and the noise of protest rolled across campuses like a second weather system. Nobody knew it, but the war that consumed every headline wasn't the war that almost ended the world. Because halfway across the map, China was coming apart at the seams. The Cultural Revolution shredded institutions and loyalty in equal measure. Mao drifted to unpredictability. Zhou Enlai tried to hold the center. Lin Biao hung over everything like a blade waiting to fall. The PLA, the backbone of the nation, had been hollowed by purges and paranoia. And under all of it sat an older wound, the unequal treaties that carved China like a carcass. The border with the Soviet Union wasn't just a line, it was a scar that never closed. American intelligence caught the first tremors. CIA watchers noticed Soviet troop chefs along the Ussuri. Signet lit up. Something was moving in the Far East. Something dangerous and something old. Then, Genbo Island, March 2nd, 1969. The spark no one expected at the worst possible moment. Chinese and Soviet accounts still disagree on who fired first, but it really doesn't matter. The clash tore open fast and violent, and both sides acted like the other had planned it. A frozen scrap of land no American could find on a map became the focal point of two nuclear states circling the edge of madness. The border lit up. Reinforcements poured in. Artillery dug in. The pressure rose. And while the world looked away, Beijing and Moscow drifted into a stance that made generals sweat. Then came the false calm. Diplomats issued the usual hopeful noises. The world unclenched. But beneath that brittle quiet, the Kremlin's hardliners sharpened their arguments. China had just tested its first atomic bomb in 1964. Its hydrogen device in 1967. It was crude, but it was real. And the Soviet planners kept circling one idea: China's doctrine of people's war, a strategy built on sheer numbers and unbreakable will rather than precision. So the Kremlin did what powers do when their nightmares start to solidify. They examined their contingencies, the ones that were cold, clinical, surgical, the plans for striking China's nuclear sites before the dragon could fully awake. Their scenarios, however, reached the nuclear thresholds, and China was well aware. Lin Biao pushed the military into heightened readiness. With bunkers prepared, cities rehearsed for the unthinkable, and the nation, already fractured, braced itself for a first strike. Through diplomatic backchannels, the Kremlin even probed Washington about how the United States might react if China's nuclear sites suddenly ceased to exist. The message landed exactly as intended. On the other side of the world, Richard Nixon made a move that carried its own kind of madness. In October 1969, he ordered a nuclear alert, framed publicly as a message to Hanoi and Moscow, but unmistakably visible to Soviet leaders weighing their options towards China. It was as subtle as a boot on a landmine. And thank God, the Soviets blinked. And in that hesitation, a shape began to form. The moment the Soviets stepped back, The fracture between Moscow and Beijing stopped being a secret feud and became a strategic opportunity. Nixon and Kissinger saw it instantly. China was scared. The USSR was rattled. The United States didn't need to pick a side. It could push both, separately, and shift the global balance without firing a shot. This is where the historians sharpen their pencils. The crisis reshaped Beijing's threat map, and many argue it accelerated the quiet diplomacy that followed. Pakistan carrying messages, doors opening in shadowed hallways, steps leading all the way to Nixon in 1972 with his visit, a moment that looked spontaneous on television, but whose fuse was lit 3 years earlier on a frozen island, soaked in blood. By September 1969, the crisis cooled enough for border talks. Not resolved, not healed, just cooled. Hardliners were pushed to the edges, war plans were shelved, and the world never learned how close it had come. But then history didn't stop, it just pivoted. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and China rose. From industrial reforms to global power projection, the imbalance flipped. The junior partner of 1969 became the central rival in the 21st century. The future Moscow feared, everyone else down navigates. Two nuclear states almost collided over a frozen island barely larger than a parking lot. Then they backed away at the last possible moment. And in that breath, the shape of the next 50 years snapped into place. And the danger, it didn't end. It just changed forms and borders, like it always does. You've been listening to Paul G's Corner, told by the guy who looks at near-nuclear history and thinks, sure, let's tuck people in with that. If this story made you feel like the world is held together with duct tape and caffeine, well, good. That's not anxiety. That's accuracy. Now, if you feel like you might need something pointless and delightful after all this existential dread, all you need to do is head to paulgnewton.com, because there's a t-shirt there for you that celebrates another year of not blowing ourselves to hell, which pairs nicely with the realization that history keeps trying to turn us into charcoal. Yes, there's a shirt for that too. Or celebrate humanity charging headlong into the future with the apparently we've always been like this shirt. The wearable reminder that every time you look at the news and sigh, you're not witnessing a collapse. You're just catching humanity in the act of being exactly what it always has been. By getting one of those shirts at paulgnewton.com, you help keep the lights on, the mic's loud, and it helps me spot fellow chaos enthusiasts wandering public spaces like they're just waiting for the next plot twist. And remember, 1969 didn't avoid disaster because anyone was competent. We survived because, for once, everyone realized they weren't fireproof.